Good morning, class 8. Welcome to the social science class. So today we will be discussing about the perhaps the last topic of this chapter, which is setting up of a new administration under the British East India Company. So today basically we will be studying about all the changes that have been brought about by the British in India, and also how they have divided the various provinces and how they have set up different ways to ensure that their administration in India is a smooth one. So we will be studying about all these things and all the changes that were brought about in India by the British. But before we go into the depth of today's discussion, let me quickly recapitulate the important points of yesterday's class. So yesterday we discussed two topics. First was claim to paramountcy, and second was doctrine of lapse. So we started our discussion yesterday by talking about Lord Hastings. So Lord Hastings, during his reign, he made sure that he or the company is the most superior entity in India. So he declared openly and officially that now in India the states are not greater than the company. So the company had the highest position in India, and these states or the kingdoms, they were all under the British. So with this theory in mind, they started to prove that they can conquer whatever lands they want, as a result of which there were lots of battles and there were lots of fight between the British company and between the rulers, and every time it was the British who could manage to win and ultimately get the territories of the various states. So in this manner, a lot of aggressive policies of extension was forwarded by the British. But of course the Indian states tried their best to stop the British from conquering their places. One such example which is given in your book is regarding Rani Channappa, who wanted to resist the British from coming inside her kingdom, and in that manner she also lost her life later on. Then again there is an example of a Chaukidar of Sangoli in Kittur itself, where he was hanged to death because he tried to destroy the British evidence and also destroy British camps so that he can resist the British from coming inside Kittur and taking it away. But of course it was the British who won all the time, and in that manner the British was able to take over Kittur as well, just like any other Indian state. Then we already know that the Maratha power was now overthrown by the British. We know that. And their land and territories which were ruled by the Marathas before, they were now all under the control of the British. So just like the Marathas, the British also conquered Punjab later on. Although there were some resistance because of the king of Punjab, whose name was Raja Ranjit Singh. But even then, finally in 1849, Punjab was annexed by British after the death of Raja Ranjit Singh. And also the British now did not only kept on establishing their rule in India, but they also started to move ahead of India and capture the neighboring countries. So the British were really afraid that the Russian army might come and capture the neighboring parts of India. So in order to ensure that all the countries of the East are under the control of the British also fought battles with Afghanistan and took Afghanistan under the company. So in this manner, there were lots of policies of annexation, due to which the British proved that now they are the superior, nobody can go against their will, and almost the entire Indian nation was under the British rule. So India was totally colonized. Then again, doctrine of lapse. So when Hastings declared that there will be war and there will be lots of taking away of or conquering of territories of the various states, at that time when Lord Dalhousie became the Governor General, he came up with another aggressive policy of paramountcy. What he did was, he declared that if a king or a ruler dies without a male heir, that means without a son, in that case the land or the kingdom of that king will automatically come under the British rule. So this was the doctrine of lapse, which was propounded by Lord Dalhousie. So the doctrine of lapse was so aggressive and so extensively used that a lot of kingdoms were now under the British. You know, a lot of examples are given in your book, like Satara, Sambalpur, Nagpur, and also a special example about Awadh is given, because people in Awadh, they really tried their best to rebel against the British, because since their king died without a male heir, they did not want the British to come in. But still, the British did not listen, obviously. The British did the best to defeat these people, and finally, even going against the will of the common people, the British took Awadh under them. Alright. So this was what we discussed yesterday in detail. So today I hope, after listening to whatever I have said till now, you all can imagine the picture of yesterday, isn't it? So remember that the British did everything that they could, and finally they were able to establish their rule in all over India. Okay, so this is what we are going to study today. We will try to understand what happened to the British administration once they were able to get hold of all the land, of all the kingdoms that they, after defeating the kings. Alright, so stay tuned, because we have a very interesting discussion coming up. And today, by the end of this explanation, you will also get your homework. So listen carefully to the explanation, then watch the video. Write down the question answers in your copy and submit it to me by Monday. Setting up a new administration. So Warren Hastings, as you know, he was a very important person who, played a great role in expanding the company's rule. So by the time Warren Hastings, acquired power and extended the company acquired power not only in Bengal but also in Bombay and Madras. So that is why the British territories were broadly divided into various administrative units for the purpose of proper administration, and these big administrative units, they were called presidencies. And during the time of Warren Hastings, there were 3 presidencies made. One was Bengal, Madras, and then Bombay. So each of these presidencies, they were ruled by a governor. Okay, so the Bengal presidency had a governor, Madras had another governor, and Bombay had another governor. So each of these presidencies, they were ruled by separate governors, and the head of the entire administration was the Governor General. Okay, so Warren Hastings, at that time, he was the Governor General. It means that he was the supreme head, the topmost head of the administration. And below him, there were the various governors of the 3 big presidencies. So since it was Warren Hastings who expanded the territory of India to such an extent that it had to be divided into 3 presidencies, that is why he is introduced as the first Governor General of British India. And it was during the time of Hastings that several changes were being brought in the entire administrative process of India. So first of all, let us talk about the judiciary. So from 1772 onwards, a very new system of justice was established. All right. So now the district had 2 courts. First was a criminal court. It was also called as Faujdari Adalat. And the second was a civil court, also known as Diwani Adalat. But there were various Hindu rules and Muslim rules also. Yes or no? So in order to ensure that the British understand the interpretation of the various Indian laws, which were meant for, religious purpose, they appointed Maulavis and the Hindu Pandits. So Maulavis were those who interpreted the Muslim laws, and Hindu Pandits were those who interpreted or who showed the meaning, explained the meaning of Indian laws for the Hindus. Okay, so the criminal courts or the Faujdari Adalat, it had to be under a Qazi. and a mufti, but under the supervision of the collectors. So the criminal courts, they were mainly headed by a qazi and a mufti. They were the most important officers of the criminal court. But above the criminal court, or above the qazi and a mufti, there was the collector. And the collector was the most important person who presided all the civil and criminal courts in India. Okay. So when it came to the Hindu laws, then there was a lot of problems, because the Brahmin Pandits, they belonged to, different communities, because of which there was difficulty actually in interpreting or in understanding the local laws for the Hindus, because each Brahmin Pandit had their own school of Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra means they had their own ways of believing in religion. Different religions taught the same thing but in a different manner. That is why interpreting the Hindu laws by the Brahmin Pandits was a very difficult thing to do. Okay, and that is why the British government decided that there should be uniformity for all the Hindus. Doesn't matter what caste, what community they belong to, but for the Hindus there should be an equal kind of a law. It should be in uniform. Therefore, in 1775 there were 11 Pandits who were invited by the British to compile a digest of Hindu laws. Compile a digest means to bring together all the Hindu laws and formulate it in such a manner so that these laws can be followed by all Hindu communities. Okay, so in 1775, the Hindu law book was made, and it was N.B. Halhed who translated this digest in English language. Okay, in 1778, a similar kind of a thing was done even for the Muslim religion. That is why a code of Muslim law was also compiled so that the European judges or the English judges can understand these laws. Because most of these laws were either written in Sanskrit for the Hindus and in Urdu or Arabic for the Muslims. Therefore, for the understanding of the European judges, these books were finally compiled and they were also translated into English. Okay. So in 1773, a Supreme Court was established in India. Under that Supreme Court, there was another court which was called as the Court of Appeal, or it was also called as the Sadar Nizamat Adalat. And this Sadar Nizamat Adalat was set up at Calcutta. So the most important person or the most important officer for a district was the collector. The main job of the collector was to collect taxes and revenue and also maintain the law and order of his district. Okay, so this law and order, the collection of taxes, all these were to be done by the collector with the help of the judges of the courts, the police officers and the darogas. Darogas also means the police officers. Okay, but of course of a lower rank. So the office of the collector was called the collectorate, and the office of this collector, that means the collectorate, it became a very important center of power and patronage. Okay, so this was all about the administrative setup of the British during the 1770s. All right, so the army now, the company army. So even the company army was, very different from what it used to be during the time of the Mughals. So the colonial rule in India, they tried to incorporate several new ideas of administration and bring about changes in the military of India. So if we compare it with the Mughal army, then you will notice that the Mughals were mainly composed of cavalry. Cavalries are the trained soldiers. Alright. So these cavalries, they were trained soldiers and they were also called as savars. And these soldiers, they would go on a war on horseback. Then along with the cavalry, there was infantry. Infantry, or we also call it the pedal soldiers. Pedal soldiers means those soldiers who would go on a war by walking. Okay, so there were either the cavalry or the infantry, and mostly these soldiers, they were trained archers. That means they knew how to do archery with a bow and an arrow. Okay, and along with archery, they were also given knowledge on the use of sword. Sword, you understand? Talwar. So the cavalry or the soldiers who sat on the horseback on a war, it dominated the army. And the Mughal state did not feel the need to have a large infantry. So because the cavalry during the Mughal period was really trained well, that is why not many soldiers were required to go by foot. So this was how the Mughal army was organized. But in the 18th century, a lot of changes took place because Awadh, Banaras, and all these kind of states, they started recruiting peasants into their army and trained them as professional soldiers. That means during the Mughal period, Awadh, Banaras, and many other Mughal successor states, that means states that were succeeded by the Mughals, they started training the peasants or the farmers into their armies. Okay, so although the farmers did not have to be a part of the army, but these peasants were given professional training to be a soldier. So taking this idea from the Mughals, the East India Company also adopted the same method. And now the company, they started recruiting or appointing an army which came to be known as the Sepoy army. Sepoy means Sipahi, a soldier. So the East India Company, for its own benefit, started applying or started, appointing an army of its own so that the British can be served well in India. And this army that was maintained by the East India Company was called as the Sepoy Army. And in 1820s, a lot of technique in warfare, means in war, it was changed. The cavalry requirement of the British army declined. That means before, the cavalry was the most important one in Mughal period, but during the British era, the importance of cavalry lowered. Why it lowered? Because now the British Empire was fighting in Burma, Afghanistan, and Egypt. So the Sepoy soldiers were appointed in that time when the British Empire was fighting with Burma, Afghanistan, and Egypt. And these soldiers, they were armed with muskets and matchlocks. You can see in the box just in the left side, it's given, the meaning of a musket is given. Musket is a heavy gun which is used by infantry soldiers, and matchlock is an an early type of gun in which there is gunpowder which is inserted inside and it is ignited by a match. That means it is lit by a match. So the musket and the matchlocks which were used by the British at that time against Burma, Afghanistan, and Egypt, for them it was not required that they needed cavalry. What was more important? The infantry was now more important, so that they can walk on foot and also they can carry the guns and go places. Okay, so the soldiers of the company's army had to keep pace with the changing military requirements, and its infantry regime now became more important. So in the Mughal period, cavalry was more important. In the British period, as I told you, infantry regime became more and more important because now the soldiers had to carry muskets and matchlocks and various kinds of guns, as they go for the war, and the infantry regime had to have more of such guns. That is why during the British time it was the infantry who got more importance than the cavalry. In the 19th century, especially in the beginning of the 19th century, the British began to develop a uniform military culture. Uniform military culture means a similar military culture all over India. Okay, so now the soldiers were increasingly subjected to European style training, drills, and discipline. That means now all the sepoys, all the sipahis and soldiers in India, they had to be trained in the European style, be it while the drills, be it the discipline, be it the weapons they use, everything had to be now regulated according to the European style. So because of this, a lot of problems were being faced by the sepoys. Okay, because some of their caste, some of their community feelings were also hurt. But of course, The British did not pay any attention to their problems, and in this way, they kept on building a force of professional soldiers. All right. So, if you have seen the movie Mangal Pandey, there I think you must have seen or you must have heard the story about the revolt of 1857, where Mangal Pandey, along with several of the sepoys, they revolted against the British because in the in that regiment there were Hindus as well as Muslims, and there was a news spread that the gunpowder which was used in the guns, they had the fat of a pig and also blood of cow or something like that, cow and pig fat. So this hurt the religious sentiments of the Hindu and Muslim soldiers there. But of course, even if they protested, but still these sepoys, they were suppressed by the British. So you will learn more about the Sepoy Mutiny or this revolt in 1857 later in your history book itself. Okay, so after studying this chapter, what can you conclude? Well, we can conclude that although the East India Company came for trading purpose, but it started to become a colonial power. It colonized India as a whole, and new technology in the early 19th century, which was brought by the British, even that aided or helped this process of changing from a trading company to a colonial power. So by 1857, almost 63% of the territory and 78% of the population of Indian subcontinent was directly ruled by the company. So we can definitely now say that the whole of India was directly or indirectly under the control of the British. Okay, so this was all for today, students. We will revise these topics once again, perhaps on Monday. But today, please go through the chapter, do the homework that will be given, and submit by tomorrow. Thank you.